Hello and welcome to the class. My name is Daniel and today we're going to be looking at bar charts, tables and pie charts for the academic writing task 1. If you have any questions after the class, you can go to the top of the page and click on the chat icon to send us a message. This is the first of 2 classes and it will last just over 20 minutes. First, we're going to talk about different ways of making comparisons, and then we're going to move on to have some practice using these ways. So by the end of the class, you should be more familiar with the vocabulary and structures you need for making comparisons. During the class, there'll be questions for you to answer. These will appear below the video, and I'll tell you when to look at them, and I'll give you 10 to 15 seconds to answer each one. So let's get started. So we're talking about making comparisons. So it's important to think, why is it important to be able to make comparisons in the writing task 1? Well, you need it nearly for every writing task 1. Most of the time you need it. The only one where you might not need it is in processes, but a lot of the time you need it, particularly for graphs and charts. So as we say here, line graphs, bar charts, pie charts and tables, these can all be used to make comparisons. Also, in maps, you sometimes need to make comparisons. We'll see what we mean by that in a moment. So here you've got a line graph, and here you might want to compare something like walking to cycling. You might want to compare those 2 things. So it's important to be able to make comparisons there. You also might want to compare bar charts. For example, you might compare this bar to this bar. To show how they're different or how they're similar. If it's the middle 2 bars, you might show how they are similar. Pie charts, again, you could make comparisons between one part of the pie chart and another part. So for example, this green part and this yellow part, you might want to compare them as well. And finally, as I mentioned, maps, you sometimes want to compare. So this is the map before and this is the map now. So in this situation, you might want to compare the past and the present. So we can see in all these different types of writing task 1, you probably want to make comparisons. So, well, how do we make comparisons? Well, you need some specific vocabulary, and you also need some grammatical structures, and that's what we're going to look at in the coming slides. So let's start with how to compare data generally. Here we have a bar chart, and it shows the number of subscribers in the US, in millions of subscribers for these streaming websites. So you've got Netflix, Disney, Hulu, and HBO. So we can see here Netflix is at nearly 60 million viewers or subscribers. Now, what I would like you to do is to have a look at the question below the video and answer this. Which of these sentences are true? And I'm going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to do that. Okay. Well, let's have a look at each one. So the first one says Disney has more subscribers than Netflix. Well, if we look closer at this chart, Disney is here, Netflix is here. Does it have more subscribers? No, it has less subscribers or fewer subscribers than Netflix. So Disney has less, and Netflix has more than Disney, you could say. So that one is not true. The second one says there are more subscribers of Hulu than HBO. Okay, again, let's have a look. Hulu is here and HBO is here. Are there more Hulu subscribers than HBO subscribers? Yes, there's more Hulu subscribers than HBO. There are less HBO subscribers than Hulu subscribers. So that one is true. Number 3, Disney is more popular than Hulu. Again, let's have a look. We've got Disney here, we've got Hulu here. It's nearly the same. Nearly the same. Maybe Disney is a little bit more popular than Hulu, but it's not a big difference. But we could say that one is also true. And number 4, the number of subscribers of Netflix, Disney, and Hulu is more than HBO. So we've got Netflix, Disney, and Hulu. We've got HBO here. Yes, that's true. Absolutely. All of these are more than HBO. So the correct answer there was 2, 3, and 4 are all true. Now, all of these here contain different comparative structures. They're making comparisons between the different bars, and we're going to look at some of those now. So here we have some basic structures with more and less. So the first one is X. X can be anything from a graph. So in the previous example, it could be Netflix, or it could be Disney, or it could be Hulu, or it could be HBO. So X is or are, depending if it's plural or singular, more or less, plus an adjective, plus than, plus Y. So Y would be another bar in that previous example. So Netflix could be X and Hulu could be Y in this example. And one of these 3 sentences matches that. And we're looking for one with an adjective. So it's actually this one here. So we can see Disney is X, is, we've got is here. More, as we said, we've got more here. Then we've got the adjective popular, adjective than, and we've got than here, and then we've got Hulu, which is the Y. Okay, so this is one structure that you can use for comparing things when you're using an adjective. So the adjective could be bigger, smaller, yeah, popular, famous, something like that. Looking at looking at letter B, there is or are more or less plus a noun plus of plus X. So again, that would be like the X here. So Disney or Netflix or Hulu. Plus than plus Y. And again, that would be another one like Disney, Netflix or Hulu. Well, we've got an example of that here. That's number 2. So we can see we've got there are. So again, there are here. More here. A noun, the noun here is subscribers. It's the noun. Then we've got of. When we're connecting 2 nouns together, we need to use the preposition of. And then we've got X, which is Hulu here. And we've got than. And then we've got Y, which is HBO. We can see there. So that's another structure when you want to compare nouns. And the thing we're comparing in this situation is the noun subscribers. In the previous example, the thing we were comparing was the adjective popular. So there are 2 different structures for comparing. Another one here we can have is X plus a verb plus more or less plus a noun plus than plus Y. Okay. So let's have a little look at the example of that. So we've got Disney, that's the X, We've got the verb has there. We've got the word more, as we said, more. We need a noun here. Again, we've got subscribers is the noun. Then we've got than, which is here, and we've got Netflix, which is the Y. The verb is related to the word subscribers. So you have subscribers. A company has subscribers. Those are collocations, so those go together. But the verb could be a different verb depending on the noun. If it was films, the noun films, well, you might use the verb make. So you might say Disney makes more films, because make a film is a collocation. So the verb can change depending on what the noun in that sentence is. Okay, the last one here is noun plus of plus X. So X and Y, they're always nouns as well. So when we have a noun and another noun, we always need this preposition of to connect them together. So noun plus of plus Disney, Netflix, Hulu, is or are, more or less, plus than, plus Y. So again, Disney, Netflix, Hulu, and we can see this here. So the number, that's the noun. Oh, sorry, we've got this whole thing. The number of subscribers, that's the noun. Of, here we go, is of. Netflix, Disney, and Hulu, that's what we're using for X there. Got three things there, but they're all X together. Then we've got is more. I got more here. Than, I got than here. And finally, the Y is HBO. That's another structure that we can use. So all of these just use more and less in them, but they're comparing different things. Sometimes they're comparing nouns, sometimes they're comparing verbs, sometimes they're comparing adjectives. And so it's nice to try to use a variety of these when you're doing your academic writing. Okay, so we've looked at some different structures there. Now, another thing that we need is some synonyms for expressing different words, different vocabulary, which we can use for making comparisons. So we can see here, we've got one set of bubbles on the left here and another set on the right. Now, what I'd like you to do is look at the question below the video and see if you can match or choose the correct option that shows these matched together. And I'm just going to give you 10 to 15 seconds to try that. Okay, well, we have here, we start with 2 times. And 2 times, this has the same meaning as double. Okay, so we want to match those two up. 2 times and double. 25%, we can match to a quarter. A fifth, we can match to 20%. That's a fifth. Half, we could say 50%. And the same as we could say equal to. Now, these are all ways of describing amounts and comparing one thing to another. So you might say something like it's 20% more, or it's double, or it's equal to do. These amounts we use a lot of the time when we're making comparisons. So it's good to have synonyms for those. Now look at the next question below the video, and I'd like you to do the same here. So you're choosing the option which has matched these up. Okay. Well, let's start with this first one. We've got just over. We could say slightly more than. That would be the same meaning. So just over means a bit more than. The word nearly, a synonym for nearly is almost. So just over means more than, and nearly is a bit less than, okay? So we could say almost. Roughly has the same meaning of about, roughly 10, roughly 20. A lot more than, or you could use the word well over. And finally, a bit, the synonym we could use is marginally. So you could say a bit more, or you could say marginally more for a small difference between them. Again, these are all really, really useful, nice language when we're making comparisons. Okay, well, we're going to have a little bit of practice with some of that vocabulary we looked on the previous slide. So here we can see a pie chart, and it's talking about money spent on transfers in millions at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different clubs. Okay, so you've got Arsenal is the blue, Brighton is the little blue one here, Chelsea is the green, Everton the yellow, Man City is the red, and Tottenham is the pink. And the numbers around the side, that's how many millions they've spent. So Chelsea have spent 222 million on players. Now, what I'd like you to do is look at the next question below the video and say, which of these options is the correct one? So we've got Man City spent over double, 2 times, or half the amount of money on transfers as Tottenham. So let's have a look. Man City and Tottenham. Man City is the red, 138, and Tottenham is the pink, 59. So 59 to 138, that's more than double. So here it's got the word over, which means more than. So over double, yes. Over 2 times, they have the same meaning. So those 2 are correct. Half is not correct. Now look at the next question and choose the correct option. Chelsea spent the most, the more, or the highest amount of money. I'll give you a moment to try that. Okay, well, if we have a quick look here, Chelsea, we can see that they did spend the most amount of money. The more, you can't say the more, because the more is when you're comparing 2 things. The most means the number 1 out of all of them. And you could also say the highest amount of money. That would be fine too. Now look at the next question, and again choose the correct options. Okay, well, if we zoom in, it says there was less, fewer, or least money spent by Brighton than the others. We can see Brighton is this 6.3. So yes, it's the smallest one. We could say, but the correct answer would be there was less money spent by Brighton than all the others. So we can't use fewer. Fewer with money doesn't work because money is an uncountable noun. So when we're talking about uncountable nouns, we'd use the comparative less, so less money. And again, we're using this than to compare them. Least is the opposite of the most. It's when you're saying it's the smallest. But here, because we've got than, we're making a comparison between two things. We're making a comparison between Brighton and all the others. All the others in this sentence is just one thing. So we're comparing those two things. Now look at the next question and choose the correct option. Okay, so it says the amount of money spent by Arsenal and Everton is nearly the same or equal or balanced. Let's just see if first if that's true. Arsenal and Everton, yeah, Arsenal 77, Everton 87, so nearly the same, quite close. So we could say yes, nearly the same would be fine. Nearly equal, yeah, that's also fine. Nearly balanced, no, that doesn't make sense. We wouldn't use the adjective balanced here. Now look at the next question and try to choose the correct option here. Tottenham spent about 75, 3/4 or half less money than Chelsea. Okay, so we could say Tottenham spent about 75% or 3/4, they have the same meaning, less money than Chelsea. We got this than. Half less doesn't really make sense. Okay, and again, if we have a look at it, Tottenham and Chelsea, Chelsea 20, 222, Tottenham 59. So yes, that's about 3/4 of the money. So now let's look at how we can compare maps. And we're going to think of general changes that we can talk about using more or less. Well, the first thing that we need to do, like with the other things, is we need to analyze the map. So let's go in and have a look here. Okay, so we can see here we've got westerly in 1815 and we've got westerly now. And there's been lots of changes that have happened. Generally, when you're doing maps, one will be in the past and one will be now. Maybe sometimes one will be now and one will be in the future. But those are the two things you're comparing. A time in the past and then another time, or maybe a time now and a future time. So some of the big changes we can see is here there were lots of fields. Now the fields have gone. So there's a railway station, a train track, a cinema that have been built. Here we can see there were houses, but now we've actually got a much larger area here, here, and up here as well that all contains houses. So there's a lot more houses than there were before as well. You can also see that there's now a sports centre, a museum, a shopping centre, a pub, a hotel. So we could possibly call those facilities. We could say there's more facilities now than there were before. So let's look at putting those into sentences. Well, the first one we could use is this. We could say, there are more houses now than before. And this is using that structure that we looked at earlier in the class. So there are plus more, plus a noun. This is a plural noun, which is why we're using are. And then the X and the Y, the two things we're comparing, now and before. And of course, we need that linking word than. So this is one of the ways of comparing things. Another could be the area is less natural than before. Let's just take a look at that to see that it's true. Well, here you had woods before and some fields, and now it's all housing and the fields have been removed as well. So we can say the area is less natural than before. Now this is using a comparative structure with an adjective. So we've got the area, we've got the verb is, we've got less, and then the adjective natural, and then we've got than plus before. Now here, there's actually an invisible now. So you could say the area is less natural now than before, but you don't have to put it there, that's optional. And then another thing we could say, we mentioned the facilities before, and with facilities, because we're talking about the town, we're using one with a verb, so we need the verb noun collocation. And when we talk about facilities, well, you would say a town has facilities. Those two go together. So here we're saying the town has more facilities than before. Again, you could say the town has more facilities now than before, but you don't need to include that now. It's implied within the sentence. So this is exactly what you want to be doing when you're comparing maps. Remember, if you have any questions, you can click on the chat icon at the top of the screen to ask us a question. Now take class 2 on this topic and do the extra training and online practice activities. Thank you for coming to the class, and we'll see you again.